Yeah, so we're going to have a Q&A now for about half an hour.
Sure.
Do you want to field your questions? Or
I'm happy to do it, and if it gets brutal or something, you guys can step in. Questions?
Did Singer give up all of his money?
Singer did not give up all of his money. He is a member of Giving What We Can, so I can assure you that he's given up at least 10% because they check if you join. My understanding, other philosophers in the room might be able to correct me on this, is that he doesn't give the 50 to 60%, but he gives a lot more than 10%. So I'm going to just guess, I have no data to back this up, 30, 40%, something like that. And he makes a lot of money because he's very famous. So he has a very large impact, but not quite as much as maybe his argument would suggest.
How many members did you say it has now?
160, is that right? 162?
162.
A bunch of chapters at different universities?
Yeah, 4 chapters including us, is that right?
It's Oxford, Princeton, Rutgers, here, and I don't know if Harvard, they're like starting a chapter, I don't know if they finished.
Yeah.
So not too many chapters actually, this is one of the first, you're getting the ground floor and stuff like that.
And how old is
How old was what?
this organization?
The organization, 2009 is when it was conceived. I don't know if it was like incorporated and the website was up, that may have been 2010, but somewhere in 2009, so very young actually. And I don't have a slide up here, but if you look at the graph, there was kind of a quick initial spurt as Toby convinced like 10 other famous moral philosophers to join, people like Peter Singer got them to join. And then there was a slow spell for a while, but recently it's been going on very quickly. I assume as a result of the foundation of chapters like this. So it's going well, it's looking good so far. If people don't have questions, I'm happy to just chat with people. I don't know if there's more stuff. You guys are welcome to ask me about anything, of course, where the data comes from, what I do, why I think any of the things that I think, why I'm crazy, stuff like that.
So I have a question. This is sort of something that I always think of. So one of the things that seems very important is not only to add years of life and years of healthy life, but to make sure doing so has some sort of sustainable future plan, whether that's about population, maintenance, and slowing population, things like that. Do you have comments on that?
Yeah, so in terms of sustainability, that's a hard one. And as far as I know, maybe someone can correct me on this, there's not a lot of good information on that because we don't quite know how to model what's going to happen in the future. So for that reason, some people are skeptical, as I mentioned, of charities that simply try to take sick people and make them well and extend their lives because we don't quite know what kind of quality of life they're going to experience, and we don't know if adding all these people to the world may cause greater problems in the future. So I'm going to just punt and say that that would be a really good topic for people to do research on, and I don't know of any good research that's being done on it now. But for people who are considering or who are worried about something like that, I think the easy answer is just to say, okay, spend your money on something else. Spend it on something like education where you don't have those same concerns. Or spend it on family planning, something like that, if you think that limiting population growth is the key towards some kind of a larger life. I mean, I think there are a lot of these ethical questions that I didn't talk about today, but you need to worry about if you really want to go into detail on these issues. So I was talking about preventing mother-to-child HIV transmission. You might think that we should be focusing more on people who kind of already are here, people who have lived with their illness for a while. And so if you thought that, you might think for ethical reasons that these simple graphs I'm putting up on the board are not the right ones. And that would be a reasonable position, but of course you need to weigh that against the massive difference in effectiveness.
I know this is a bit nebulous, but I was wondering if you happen to have any data in regards, the celebrities who give a lot more money to charity and are glorified for it. But I was wondering if you had any data regarding as to how effectively they gave that money to charity.
So I don't know what the specific causes go towards, but I know that when you look at the specific things that they use the money for, it's rarely international causes. There are exceptions. And if they're giving domestically, which is what most American celebrities do, it's really hard to have anywhere near the impact that I was showing you when you operate in Kenya, in India, places like that. So without knowing for sure, I can fairly confidently say that at least most of that celebrity giving was on the order of the kind of before pictures that I showed you. You know, the 2 years of life versus the 600, or the 7 years of education versus whatever. Now, of course, they get to multiply that by 100,000 because they're giving a lot more than we would be giving. But I think those are the kind of charities that they tend to give towards. So a really worthwhile thing to do, and I wouldn't know how to do it, would be to convince athletes, entertainers, celebrities, not just to give more, but to give more effectively, because as much of an impact as we could have by giving more, if Oprah were to give that $41 million to more cost-effective uses, and I think she does target some international charities, but if she were to give it all that way, she could have a massive impact. So that's the best I can do for you.
You described very effectively the multiplier of getting smarter. I suppose there's also a multiplier from persuading to give smart lives. I mean, in some sense, if I can think of some effective strategy to make even some small, to make Denmark use its money a little more effectively, or if I can hang out in some Beverly Hills coffee shop and find some celebrity who's already giving a lot of money, that would be another multiplier.
That's definitely true. So what you're trying to say is that I did a really good thing by talking to you. I convinced a few of you to give more. No, I think that's right. And actually, that was the motivation that Toby Ord had when he founded the organization. It was not some nebulous idea that we should all be doing this. It was the very concrete idea, I can have an even greater impact than my £1 million donation by getting all these other people to sign up. So that's completely right. And when I mentioned other talks here, I would imagine that maybe people will come and talk about those other ways that you can have a greater impact, one of which is certainly convincing other people to give more or give more effectively. So, completely right.
Does this organization like make any efforts to reach out to like Oprah Winfrey?
You know, do you know the answer to that? I don't.
I don't. I know that Toby Ord has got, and others have gotten a fair amount of press on
BBC.
like CNN, BBC, Fox News, things like that. But as far as I know, there haven't been any delegations sent to celebrities or so on.
You should just go to her show and talk to her.
It's over.
Doesn't it? So part of the problem with this, though, and I don't know if this is just something that's intrinsically difficult to do, or something that, given what we can, just isn't doing well yet, is that when you see some of these interviews that Toby Ord is doing, when you see these newspaper articles, I showed you, they all focus on the quantity of the gift. They don't really focus on what the cause that's being given to is. And so I was telling Carol before we got here, I saw Toby Ord give an interview with the BBC. And so he gives this long interview about how he's giving up this much money to the people who can use it most, blah, blah, blah. And so they cut away after the end of the interview to the anchor, and the anchor turns to the one anchor turns to the other and says, yeah, it's really important to give to effective charities because you know that the CEO of UNICEF makes 20 times the CEO of the Salvation Army. And I wanted to pound my head into the desk and say, you missed the whole point, right? That's the wrong way to be thinking about these things. The other thing, the article that I quoted there from the Guardian, I believe, where they're interviewing Toby and she's talking about how Toby Ord's gift of this large has set an example for all of us. I didn't show you the rest of the article because it depressed me. The reason it depressed me is because the article began with the reporter saying something like, where I live in London, you usually don't open your door when a stranger knocks because it's not a safe part of town. This morning, though, someone knocked at my door with, whatever, undesirable clothing or something. It didn't look neat and presentable. But I opened the door anyway because of an interview I had done earlier. And it turns out that she ended up giving money to, this person for whatever, a school project or something like that. Pay money for the soccer team to go somewhere, something like that. And without talking about whether or not that's a good idea, the thought that this inspired that, again, it's completely wrong. Just totally missed the point. The point is not just give more. The point is to target it in the right ways. And I'm quite certain that the reporter did not do enough research to figure out whether this was a cost-effective way to do it. So whether or not she should have given the money, she shouldn't use it as an illustration of the kind of effect that this organization can have. So the problem, so you mentioned going to someone like Oprah and seeing if they could convince her. The worry is you have to work really hard to get people to understand the difference between giving more and giving more effectively. I suspect that if you go on Oprah, the result, the kind of consequence of that is people saying, yeah, and Oprah is really great because she gives $41 million. She's already giving more than 10% of her income or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's a hard sell, but a good one.
I was just suggesting that she's an intelligent person who would probably like to give more effectively? Maybe she doesn't know.
I have a friend who knows where she lives and knows what grocery store she frequents.
And if you don't
So
know,
I'll see if I can do. I'll see what I can do about that. I'll see what I can do about that.
I mean, how can we really be sure about how we measure effectiveness? So, like, with the cancer child, like, say we save that one cancer child, and she grows up to be one of these CEOs you're talking about that does huge things for the world, versus, you know, so how can you be so sure about what?
So the short answer is you can't. I don't claim to be sure about any of this stuff. And in fact, some of the research I do in philosophy of economics shows that there are a lot of problems with these measurements. There are a lot of conceptual issues that are not well sorted out with how these are done. So if you gave me an intervention and you had an economist saying, this one will save 400 years of life, but this other one will only save 250 years of life, how confident would I be that the one is really better than the other? Not confident at all. That said, if you show me 400 years versus 2 years, I'm very confident that the one is better than the other, because the measurement problems aren't that large. So measurement has its own issues that come up. And then further, all these other things you're talking about, it's true we can't. It's possible that the child, you know, that the child leukemia patient will grow up to have this massive impact on the world, and, you know, all the people that we're saving in Africa will grow up to be horrible dictators who oppress other people, or something like that, right? It's possible. All you can do is take your best guess. And I don't think I could, with a straight face, say that there's a reasonable chance that saving one life here is better than saving 100 lives somewhere else. It's possible, but not very likely.
Well, I've heard people talk about like the difference between Paul Farmer and Mother Teresa. Like Mother Teresa could kind of just maybe have smaller numbers impact on the people, and Paul Farmer like it's huge, like down, you know. And it's like, how can you really measure that?
So, I mean, in terms of measuring the actual impact, in practice it's really hard, but in theory we could just look at the number of people that she ministered to. And yeah, well, in terms of effectiveness, it's going to be hard to do that. So again, you're just going to have to make assumptions, and they're not going to be perfect. You just do the best you can. Sometimes the difference is big enough that you can make confident predictions about which is better. Sometimes it's not.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not. There's going to be no precision there, but I think sometimes you can still get answers that are good enough. And I should say about like the Mother Teresa case, I wasn't trying to make the point that the only thing that matters when you give is the quantity of the benefit you produce. Some people think that. I don't think that. I think that's one very important component. So it still might be open to say that someone like Mother Teresa, who's actually working with these people and doing stuff, maybe there's a certain kind of virtue there that maybe isn't in what Paul Farmer does, where he's sitting in an office that was right down the hall, you know, in Cambridge, Massachusetts or something.
Right.
So I don't think to say that's everything, but it's part of it. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
There's a question back there.
Yeah, it seems that we're trying to be as effective as possible, but it seems that that eventually we could reach a point where there are needs that would be unmet, perhaps even domestically. I mean, if you somehow luckily convinced everyone to go international, there'd be then a need for domestic assistance. And so, where do we find those two views to be compatible? I mean, we still want to take care of people around us, but we definitely want to be effective, and it does seem compelling that $10 can feed 3 people for a day over there, or a meal here.
Right.
We would want to over there, but there's still a need here.
Yeah.
And so where do we?
So I don't have an answer to that question. I can say that the question about relative obligations to people who are part of your community versus people who are maybe not part of your community is a difficult one. And I suspect Toby Ord might disagree with me, but I think if I thought I could have, let's say, twice the impact abroad that I could have here, as the difference was only a factor of 2, I would probably give most of my money here. Now again, a lot of people would disagree with that, so that's a controversial claim. But, in fact, the multiplier isn't 2, it's 100 or 1,000, and so I agree that this is, or I think that this is where we should be spending our money. So, part of the answer I want to say is that the exact level of weight to give to domestic needs versus international needs is a difficult question to answer, but part of me wants to say we don't need to answer it yet, because whatever the right answer is, we're way, past it, right?